All right. Woo! Hey guys, I'm inspired by The Incredibles, so I'm back with another build. Woo! All right, here it is, guys. Gazer Beam's helmet. Now, very pleased how this came out. Just to start off with, and I know Gazer Beam wasn't one of the main characters in the movie, but he was mentioned quite a bit in The Incredibles. Now, my son is a big fan of the movie. He loves the movie, and when he saw his helmet, like, he was like over the top with it. As usual, I'm going to talk about the process of how I went about finishing this. I'm going to start from the very top, and that's with the modeling. As I do with all my models, I model in Cinema 4D. Pulled some reference pictures from online, and there's very little. There's like maybe 2 or 3. Again, because he wasn't one of the main characters in the movie. There's a black and white picture that's online of Gazer Beam, and I kind of use that as my reference photo for the helmet. In terms of the logo, what I did was I pulled that reference picture of when he was in the cave, when Mr. Incredible found him in the cave, with the skull head. And quick side note, I was gonna, this is so bad to say, I was gonna print a skull and put it on top of it to kind of replicate that scene, but I don't think that was gonna fly over well with my son, so I didn't do it. But no, I pulled that reference photo into Illustrator, and I went ahead and made a vector file of the logo. I pulled that into Cinema 4D and just did a simple extrude, and then applied that to the helmet, and then meshed everything together. Now, one thing I will note is that I did attempt to put the logo on the side of the side parts of the actual helmet, and I'll talk about what happened with this when I printed and what I'm going to do about it. But that's as far as the 3D modeling went. This was really straightforward. This was not a hard model to make, and I may do a tutorial for this because in terms of tutorials and 3D modeling, I want to start off with some basic shapes and how we can turn basic shapes into a helmet like this. And I think it'll just be more easier for people to grasp versus trying something complex. So I'll probably gradually, slowly move into more complex helmet models as tutorials. But this is one that I'm thinking about doing. So now we're gonna move into the actual printing. So this was printed on the CR10, and it took about maybe a day or 2 to print. And IC3D sponsored the filament for this build. and it printed very well. I usually print my helmets upside down, so I usually print it in this orientation. And the reason why I was doing that was to save on support material that builds up in the middle in order to support the helmet and keep it from caving in or having the print messed up. But recently, I've seen some people printing their helmets right side up and just having supports around where it needs it and not in the middle of the helmet itself. And I decided to do that for this print and try it out and see how it would work. And it worked amazingly fine. The only thing is that now, instead of most of the cleanup work being on top or the messy part being on top, now it's on the inside. And to be frank with you, I really don't care. Nobody's seeing the inside, and plus that you can cover this. You can decide to clean it up if you want, or you can just lay down fabric on the inside if you're that concerned about who's seeing the inside of the helmet. I'm not. So I started off by sanding the print. I started off with 100 grit, moved up to 150, then 220, 600, then 800. And once I got to 800, I coated it with a coat of primer filler. Once the primer filler was dry, I applied spot glazing putty to all the areas that needed some extra work and extra filling, and where the print lines were still kind of deep. And I sanded that back down, starting at 220, moved up to 600, then 800. At that point, I was ready to go ahead and start wet sanding. And for wet sanding this helmet, I used 1,500 and 2,000 grit sanding paper. Of course, starting with the 1,500, moving up to 2,000. And the trick for me, at least that works for me, is keeping the sandpaper wet. So as I'm sanding, I make sure I'm keeping the sandpaper pretty wet and the helmet pretty wet, and just moving in a circular motion around the helmet. Now this really helped. This is one of the smoothest finishes I've had out of everything I've done so far, and I can honestly contribute that to the wet sanding. The problem I was talking about earlier with the side pieces here, my initial thought was to have these light up, and I'm still probably going to do that, but it was very, very difficult to get into these areas because the lines are so small and my needle files cannot get into this, and I was afraid of breaking it versus cleaning it up. So I figured if I got my needle files, and actually as I was cleaning up one of these, one of my needle files snapped, and I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna leave it alone. So I'm just gonna leave it as is for now. My initial plan was to fill it in with epoxy putty, then sand it down, but for time's sakes, I just left it as is. It doesn't look terrible, but eventually I'll probably make these light up on the side here. That space is there. I will be making this file available for download, but it will not have, and I'll probably keep two options. I'll probably keep the option where you can have the logo on the side and you can make it light up yourself as well, and I'll have the version, which is the movie version, that does not have the logos on the side. Alright, so let's talk about paint. I will say that this project, I did not have any problems, or any major problems. Like I said, the only problem I had was the side logo, but outside of that, I did not have, surprisingly, I didn't have any like major issues or that I could really talk about, to be honest, which is surprising. This build went surprisingly smooth. Don't know why. Maybe the stars were aligned right, but everything went fine with this build, and I could say that for the most part, this was one of the easiest builds, or one of the easier builds that I had. I first laid down a layer of black gloss paint, and then I went over that with this Rust-Oleum blue metallic paint. As I was spraying it on, it was glossy, but then it kind of died down to like a semi-gloss, which I was alright. So then I masked off the top of the helmet, and I used Vallejo Air, I believe it was aluminum, for the visor area, and I airbrushed that on. And it went on just fine. I didn't have any problems with the airbrush. Didn't have any problems with the airbrush getting clogged or anything. Again, this project, everything just went fine, with the exception of the side logos. And that's more of an aesthetic thing than actually something going wrong with the actual build itself. In terms of the logo, I did not want to take the chance of trying to mask off some of the fine areas. So I used the silver rub and buff and just went over it, and that worked just fine, and it actually matches with the actual aluminum. So everything went great. I was happy, super happy with how this turned out. In terms of the visor, now the visor, I used a red lighting gel. So those gels that you use to change your lights to a different color, I had an extra one laying around, and I just cut a strip of it and placed it on the inside and hot glued it into the area. Because I knew I was going to use the lighting gel for this helmet, I created a space in the helmet that the lighting gel could sit flush into the actual helmet. And it worked out perfectly. So I was able to put the lighting gel and then hot glue it in there, and it sit there just fine, and it's far enough away from the eyes where it's not pushing up against your eye. I did go ahead and add lighting to this. I added a strip of LED light in here, hot glued that into place. I probably add another strip along the bottom of the visor, but I just added one at the top so the light is kind of shining down. And I have a battery pack in the back of the helmet, and that just turns on like so. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to see with the light, but the lights are pretty cool. So yeah, I'm quite sure you guys want to see me try this on, and it fits great even with the battery pack, and it kind of helps it keep it in place. And I know I look ridiculous right now, but yeah, super happy how this came out. Again, it was one of the easier builds, and right now I'm seeing everything in like red. So yeah, Gazer Beam helmet, super happy. Alright guys, so that does it for this build. Had super fun. It was an exciting build. One of the easier builds that I've done, even from the modeling even down to the actual finishing of it. It actually was pretty quick. I was able to finish this build within like, I think it only took me a day to do it, and then I allowed myself an extra day for the paint to dry before I masked off anything. So really it took me 2 days, but if I had done it all in, I could have got it done all in 1 day. But again, super fun. So if you guys want to print it, head over to my Patreon page. You can become a Patreon and download the file and print it yourself. I would like to thank Make again for hosting this video. Can't thank them enough. They've been so good to me, and I'm so glad to share my content with you guys and with Make. And I also like to thank IC3D for sponsoring the filament for this build. So if you guys like to keep up with the projects that I'm working on, you can follow me on Twitter at TheBrokenNerd83, or you can follow me on Instagram at TheBrokenNerd83. Once again, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. If you want to check out some of my work, you can also head over to my YouTube page and see some more of the builds that I made. I just posted a video of this guy. I just posted a video of this Nova Corp helmet, and you can head over to my channel and see how I printed and finished this guide. Once again, thank you all for tuning in. Peace and love. God bless. I'm Gazer Beam.